Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. Good morning to everybody. I welcome to all the participants for today's event that is about the World Food Safety Day. Safe food contribute to our healthy planet and almost to our healthy future. World Food Safety Day is an international event established by the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United States to recognize the importance of safe food globally every year on 7th of June since 2018. The day is intended to provide an opportunity to bring the attention activities that are connected with the food safety sectors. The purpose of this day's celebration is to sensitize the different stakeholders of the society to pay attention on the importance of the healthy, safe, and nutritious food. So today we are here to commemorate this globally renowned day through this international seminar. I warmly welcome to our first participant, Professor Gulhan Unlu from the University of Idaho. I welcome you on behalf of my institute. I would like to request, please proceed with your presentation as per today's theme of World Food Safety Day. Welcome, ma'am.
Thank you, Dr. Adnan.
Slides are visible to you?
Yes, they are visible to me. That's wonderful. Thank you so very much.
Move on. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Before I go ahead and get started, I would like to take this opportunity to express my thanks to Dr. Adnan for his very kind invitation. I am delighted to be here. Today, we'll be talking about food safety. I have quite a bit or quite a long presentation. Hopefully, I will be able to cover everything. If not, please let me know when it is time to complete or wrap up my presentation. Next slide, please. So we'll start with a question. What is food safety? Obviously, it is World Food Safety Day. So what exactly are we talking about? So when we refer to food safety, we are referring to the conditions and practices that preserve the quality of food to prevent contamination and foodborne illness. I think this is the most basic definition of food safety. So next slide, please. So we need to talk about food safety hazards to be able to understand what food safety is all about. Very quickly, we have three different kinds of hazards of interest. One of them is called physical hazards. Then we have chemical hazards, and we have biological hazards. Let me go through these hazards very quickly, just to give you some ideas. Next one, please. Okay, let's talk about physical hazards. And I will give you some examples. So when it comes to physical hazards, some of the hazards of interest include anything that is sharp. Think about, maybe a piece of glass or maybe a piece of rock or something in that line going into food. We may have choke hazards if the food that we are consuming, is large and it has maybe, sharp edges and things like that. This can cause oral cavity damage in addition to some sort of a perforation or maybe some sort of a laceration in the human gastrointestinal tract. And even filth could be considered physical. You have to understand, though, if filth contains any kind of a biological agent, such as a foodborne pathogen, then it can be considered a biological hazard. And when it comes to filth, this could be a piece of insect, this could be, dirt or soil, so on and so forth. Moving on to chemical hazards, we do have different kinds of chemical hazards of interest. So by definition, when we talk about chemical hazards, we are referring to any kind of a substance that can render a food unsafe for consumption. So we are referring to chemical substances. So the question that we would like to ask is, how do chemicals get into food? As you can imagine, we have naturally occurring chemicals in foods. So this could be in the food, or this could be in an ingredient that is incorporated into food. In some cases, we add some chemicals to food when we process foods. These are intentionally added chemicals. You can also call them ingredients. I mean, if you incorporate them at concentrations that are allowed, there's no concerns, but sometimes mistakes can happen, especially human mistakes. If that's the case, an intentionally added chemical could become a concern. And last but not least, sometimes certain chemicals can be added unintentionally, meaning, you don't want to add something, but by mistake you add it, again, mostly because of human mistakes. So regardless, chemicals can get into our food, sometimes at concentrations higher than intended, and sometimes wrong chemicals make it to our food supply. Let's talk about biological hazard next. Actually, let me back up. So we have some examples of chemical hazards. For example, glucosinolates. They are found in certain food ingredients, and again, at certain concentrations, they can be harmful. We have mycotoxins being produced by fungi. Actually, when we grow our plants, we depend on pesticides. Sometimes we use industrial chemicals in cleaning and sanitation. Even heavy metals can be found in various foods. So these are some examples of chemical hazards. Regarding mycotoxins, these are toxins that are produced by fungi. And I gave some examples here, such as aflatoxin, deoxynivalenol, fumonisin, ochratoxin A, and zearalenone. So these are some good examples of mycotoxins that are produced by molds, and that can be present in many different kinds of foods, including produce and nuts and grains, so on and so forth. Last but not least, I want to give some examples of industrial chemicals, such as dioxins and PCBs. These are environmental toxins that can be found in the environment at different concentrations. Melamine actually is very commonly used in many countries, in many contexts. We have PFAs. Again, all of these chemicals actually are considered chemical hazards at certain concentrations. I want to make one point here. Even when the concentration is low, extended exposure over time can create concerns for people who are exposed to these chemicals. So we do need to be very careful. With that, I'm going to move on to biological hazards, which is really the main topic for me today. Under biological hazards, as you can imagine, we have bacterial pathogens and or their toxins. We have viruses, we have prions, and we have various parasites of interest. And let me give you some examples of these biological hazards. So we'll start with foodborne pathogenic bacteria. I do have a long list, but I will try to explain some of these pathogens if we have time. So Bacillus cereus, Campylobacter, Clostridium botulinum, Clostridium perfringens, Escherichia coli, specifically enterohemorrhagic E. coli, Listeria monocytogenes, Salmonella, Shigella, Staphylococcus aureus, Vibrio, and Yersinia. Yersinia, actually, it should be Enterocolitica. There's a mistake there. My apologies. These are some of the bacterial pathogens of interest. So regarding viruses, again, we have quite a few viruses out there, but I have listed two very common ones that make us ill very often. Norovirus is one, and hepatitis A virus is the second one. Again, we are not going to talk about them today, but please know that many viral pathogens actually make more humans sick compared to bacteria. It's just that we don't hear much about them compared to bacteria because it's much easier to study bacterial pathogens. A lot of people study bacterial pathogens. Unfortunately, we don't have a lot of virologists doing the research on these viral pathogens, and it is difficult to diagnose illnesses, foodborne illnesses caused by viruses. So that is really unfortunate. Moving on to parasites. So again, we have parasites that can make us ill as well. Again, I'm not going to be talking about these parasites, not my area of interest or research, but I want to give you a couple of examples in the next slide. So we do have two different kinds or two different types. One of them is called protozoa. Under this category, you will see organisms such as Cryptosporidium, Cyclospora, Toxoplasma, and Giardia. And many of them actually are waterborne protozoa. If the water is contaminated and not treated properly, people can get sick. And we had some foodborne illnesses here in the United States over the years. We also have helminths as part of this category, such as roundworms, tapeworms, and flukes. All of these organisms can cause foodborne illness as biological agents. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to move on to foodborne illness. Let's talk about foodborne illness. Sometimes you're going to hear the term food poisoning or foodborne disease. We are really referring to the exact same thing. And I think a lot of people who are not studying food science, who are not in the area, use the term food poisoning. But if you're a food scientist or a food microbiologist, you would use the term foodborne illness and foodborne disease. So this is pretty much an illness that that occurs after consuming some sort of a food that has been contaminated with some sort of a biological agent or biological hazards, such as we discussed earlier, a bacterium, maybe a virus, maybe a parasite, so on and so forth. The good news is foodborne illness is really preventable, even though, when it happens, it can be very costly. So, if you have a good understanding of where foodborne illness comes from, you're going to be able to prevent it. Unfortunately, it is very common, even though we know more about foodborne illness right now. So it happens all the time as we speak. I'm sure somebody is, or a lot of people, I should say, are ill because of foodborne illness someplace in the world. So by definition, when two or more people get sick from the exact same illness after consuming the same beverage or same food, this is considered an outbreak. You may think, well, it's just only two people, but by definition, that's what we consider an outbreak, at least here in the United States. And in the United States, we consider our food supply to be really very safe, and we are really proud of it. But even then, even when we say that, we have such a good food supply, it is safe, we have every year 48 million cases of foodborne illness, meaning 48 million Americans get sick every year. And that means 1 in 6 Americans is getting sick every year because of something that they have eaten or they have consumed. And as a result, 128,000 people go to hospitals. We're talking about a lot of money being spent in medical care. And unfortunately, 3,000 people die every year because of foodborne illness. You may think, that's not many people considering the US population, which is 350 million people. But when you think about it, if this person who died is, your family member or your friend or your neighbor, then, the situation is really very different. So to me, nobody should be dying because of something that they have eaten. I completely understand, people getting sick and dying because of serious illnesses, such as, God forbid, cancer or something else. But, foodborne illness, I think, is really very sad. So with that, I want to give you a couple of slides on some important information if you want to access it. We have the Center for Disease Control and Prevention located in Atlanta, Georgia, in the United States. They do have a wonderful website, and you can actually take a look at all different kinds of outbreaks that are happening now and in the past. You can study them. You can actually check to see if they have been completed or if they are being investigated, so on and so forth. This is a great website if you want to learn more about foodborne illness outbreaks. And also, there is another really nice site. It's A to Z Index for foodborne illness. This is also a part of this CDC website. If you want to learn more about foodborne illness, I would highly recommend that you visit this site. Regarding foodborne illness severity, some of these illnesses could be relatively mild. Maybe you don't even know that you're ill. It comes and it goes, which is great. Unfortunately, some of these illnesses could be really very serious, meaning, you may need to spend maybe a week at home. You can't go to work. You cannot study. It is a problem simply because, you suffer physically, mentally. Your employee suffers. If you're a student, you won't be able to go to school. You miss school, and your family suffers. And sometimes some of these illnesses actually can have secondary consequences. For example, today's foodborne illness could be tomorrow's chronic illness, such as arthritis or maybe damage to your nervous system, so on and so forth. And lastly, some of these illnesses could be life-threatening. Unfortunately, there are groups of populations that we will talk about. When they get foodborne illness, they may die because of it. And we'll talk about some of those illnesses in a few. These are general foodborne illness symptoms. It depends on the pathogen that is making you ill. You may have upset stomach. You may have stomach cramps. You may have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and fever. And sometimes, of course, the combination of those illnesses. And here, I wanted to tell you a little bit about some of the really serious health problems and long-term effects of foodborne illness. In the past, a lot of people thought, foodborne illness comes and goes. When you heal, you heal. That is not the situation with certain illnesses. For example, chronic arthritis in elderly people have been linked to salmonellosis during their lifetime, multiple cases of salmonellosis. Brain and nerve damage can be caused by certain foodborne illness agents. One example is Listeria monocytogenes causing foodborne illness And then that is followed by meningitis in the elderly population. And kidney failure can be caused by Escherichia coli 015787, and especially in young children less than 5 years old. And there is a technical term for it. It is called hemolytic uremic syndrome, or HUS. This can be deadly. And if it is not deadly, unfortunately, these poor children need to go and get dialysis in a regular schedule, which is really very unfortunate. So these are some of the people or groups of people with a higher risk for foodborne illness: adults age 65 and older, children younger than 5, people with weakened immune systems, and pregnant women. Let's talk about some of these people with weakened immune systems, or we call them also immunocompromised. Somebody who has diabetes, somebody who has either a liver illness or a kidney illness, an alcoholic, somebody who has HIV virus or a full-blown AIDS, and someone who's receiving chemotherapy or radiation therapy because of their cancer, can be considered immunocompromised. So let's talk about some of the foodborne illness types really very quickly. I call this foodborne illness rule of thumb. Just to remember it quickly, I call it FBI. So sometimes I ask questions to my students. I give them some case studies and I ask them to solve those case studies. I think this is important because some of them may work for CDC someday and do foodborne illness investigations. So the rules are really very straightforward. If an illness has a very short incubation time, I usually call them intoxications, simply because there is a toxin that is already formed in the food. And these individuals who consumes these food with toxins can have upper GI tract symptoms, such as they may be nauseous or they may start vomiting. Again, this is a short incubation. Think of it as if, you go to a restaurant with a couple of friends, you start eating, it's about 30 minutes, you feel really ill, you make it to the restroom. So that is very likely an intoxication because your food contains a toxin already. But if you experience a longer incubation time, this can be considered infection, and this usually would lead to lower GI tract symptoms such as abdominal cramps and diarrhea. And I want to give you some examples. So if the incubation time is really very short, from minutes to hours, we have a situation where the individual very likely consumed maybe some chemical toxins. If you could click, there's an animation here. So chemical toxins, something like copper poisoning. Think about those machines where you go and get your soda, and if there's copper wires, you could have actually this kind of foodborne illness, which has happened in the United States. So next one, please. Neurotoxins, histamine and allergens can also act very quickly. I'm talking about minutes. Examples would be some of the toxins that are found in shellfish, such as oysters and mussels and things like that. And also we have something called ciguatera poisoning. This is because of algae making toxins on seafood and making people ill. So if the incubation is anywhere from short to medium, we are referring to 1 hour to 12 hours. Let's take a look at this animation. the individual consumes food that contains bacterial enterotoxins. So what happens is that these enterotoxins affect the stomach of the individual, and which in turn, these toxins affect medulla, which is the center in our brain that tells us to vomit. And the person vomits. On top of that, they may have diarrhea. Not everybody has diarrhea in addition to vomiting, but they may have that. So some examples would be Staphylococcus aureus enterotoxins in food, or Bacillus cereus enterotoxins in food. So once again, this is we call this emetic illness because it causes emesis or vomiting. Okay, let's take a look at the next type of illness, which is an infection. When the incubation is long, anywhere from 6 hours to 10 days, very likely you have some sort of an infection in your body. And we do have an animation for that as well. And let's take a look at that. So here's a human being. It's consuming food with different kind of, well, I haven't seen the animation. I don't know why. So we do need to see the animation. I don't know what happened to the animation. So basically, let me explain it to you. The person of interest consumes food with certain organisms. Those organisms travel in the body, they colonize, and that colonization process takes quite a bit of time. And then they have diarrhea and abdominal cramps as major symptoms. But at the same time, their medulla, which is the emesis center, can be triggered during this process. So they may have not only diarrhea, but also vomiting. Some of the organisms of interest include Escherichia coli, Salmonella, Campylobacter, Yersinia. So these are mostly gram-negative pathogens that cause infection. And again, the incubation time for these illnesses could go up to 10 days. It depends on the pathogen. Okay, let's talk about some of these foodborne illness agents. And let's see what we have here. The first, okay, my first slide is all about the top 5 microorganisms that cause illnesses from food eaten in the United States. I don't know what exactly is considered top 5 for Pakistan. I would love to know about it. But here in the United States, we have norovirus, Salmonella, Clostridium perfringens, Campylobacter, and Staphylococcus aureus as our top 5. I must mention the list of these organisms change every year, depending on our statistics. But, I think for the most recent statistics, that's our top 5 here. And unfortunately, some of these foodborne illness agents cause illnesses that require hospitalization. As an example, I would like to give you Clostridium botulinum, which causes botulism. This is a very serious illness. The good news is it is really very rare. We don't get many of this in the United States. Maybe we get about 5 to 10 cases or outbreaks every year. But the problem is when somebody has botulism and they survive, they usually spend anywhere from 6 months to a year in the hospital to go back to somewhat normal. And we are talking about millions and millions of dollars being spent on that individual because healthcare here is really very expensive. So very likely somebody who survives botulism and then stays in the hospital for about 6 months is going to be spending about $1.5 million or something in that line for that illness. And hopefully they have insurance that would cover some of that money. Listeria monocytogenes is another very important pathogen of interest. And This organism can cause different kind of illnesses in different kind of individuals. For example, a pregnant lady may lose their child. If the child is born, the child is usually born with meningitis. An elderly individual may have a Listeriotic meningitis. Somebody who is healthy otherwise may have diarrhea and vomiting. But as you can imagine, people who are immunocompromised will really suffer because of listeriosis that is caused by Listeria monocytogenes. Escherichia coli, 015787, and other enterohemorrhagic E. coli bring immunocompromised individuals to hospital as well, specifically children who are younger than 5 and the elderly. Last but not least, Vibrio can be a concern also in immunocompromised individuals, and this organism can lead to serious hospitalizations as well. So remember these 4 as your really dangerous pathogens that can lead to hospitalizations and thus death, unfortunately. Okay, very quickly on Bacillus cereus. This is an organism that can cause 2 different illnesses. One of them is the diarrheal illness, which is manifested as an infection. So symptoms include abdominal pain, watery diarrhea, sometimes nausea that starts in about 8 to 16 hours. Looking at this timeline and the symptoms, it is clear that this is an infection. With emetic syndrome, which is an intoxication, symptoms actually include nausea and vomiting and malaise, and this can start as early as 30 minutes and as late as 5 hours. So these are like 2 different illnesses, like day and night, but the same organism can cause that. So common food sources, desserts, meat dishes, and dairy products are associated with diarrheal illness. Rice and pasta, which are starchy foods, are considered to be common vehicles for emetic illness. Campylobacter species, by the way, some of these, actually all of these illustrations are pictures of these pathogens. I did not really draw them from my mind. I found these pictures. They are electron microscopy, just as a side note. With Campylobacter species, this is an infection as well. The infection actually can begin as early as 2 days, as late as 5 days after exposure. Symptoms of interest include diarrhea, often bloody diarrhea, stomach cramps, and stomach pain. Common food sources include raw or undercooked poultry, unpasteurized milk, and contaminated water. The next organism of interest, Clostridium botulinum. We just talked about Clostridium botulinum causing botulism and creating a major hassle for people because they need to stay in hospital for several months, even a year. So symptoms, this is an intoxication, by the way, and symptoms start as early as 18 hours to 36 hours after exposure. This is a very different kind of an illness because it affects central nervous system. So people experience double or blurred vision, droopy eyelids, slurred speech, difficulty swallowing and breathing, dry mouth, muscle weakness, and eventually paralysis, because you're not going to be able to breathe when you have this kind of an intoxication. It only gets worse. And common food sources for this illness, fortunately really rare, at least in the United States, improperly canned or fermented foods, usually homemade, and also prison-made illicit alcohol. Interestingly, this happens more often in other countries compared to the United States. Clostridium perfringens. This is a infection or a toxico-infection that begins in 6 to 24 hours after exposure. Symptoms include diarrhea, stomach cramps. And the good news is this is a mild illness. It comes and goes, unless, of course, the individual of interest is immunocompromised. Common food sources include really rich, protein-rich foods, something like beef or poultry, a large roast, gravy, so on and so forth, simply because Clostridium perfringens grows extremely fast and really well on protein-rich foods. And the next organism of interest is enterohemorrhagic Escherichia coli. One example is 0157 serotype. This is an infection. The symptoms actually begin in 3 to 4 days after exposure and include stomach cramps, bloody, profuse diarrhea, and vomiting. Unfortunately, a small population of the people who get this kind of an illness actually develop a much serious illness, and they may need hospital care, they may need dialysis, so on and so forth. So common food sources include raw or undercooked beef, raw, or in other words, unpasteurized milk, unpasteurized juice, raw vegetables, raw sprouts, and unsafe water. Listeria monocytogenes, we just talked about it, not too long ago. Infection begins anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. This creates a problem because sometimes, if somebody gets sick in 4 weeks, and if you interview them and if you ask them, what have you been eaten, or what have you eaten like lately or 4 weeks ago, people will not remember. In some cases, actually, the organism can make somebody sick in about 7 weeks, which is a concern because this makes foodborne illness investigation really very difficult. I think I already mentioned what kind of manifestations this illness brings in pregnant women, in elderly, and in healthy individual. So I'm not going to go through that again, but it is a really very serious illness. So common food sources include soft cheeses such as Mexican style queso fresco, or feta cheese that is very common in Greece, and also my native Turkey. These are soft cheeses with high water activity that supports listeria growth. Raw sprouts, melons, hot dogs, liver pate, deli meats, smoked seafood, and unpasteurized milk also have been linked to listeriosis. And these are this is an organism called Salmonella, also a major concern. The major symptoms include diarrhea, fever, stomach cramps, and vomiting. Again, just like with most gram-negative pathogens, this could be coming from various animal-based foods that are undercooked or underprocessed, including undercooked chicken or raw chicken, turkey, meat, eggs, unpasteurized milk juice, unpasteurized milk juice, actually raw produce as well, such as fruits and vegetables. And also, very interestingly, you could get salmonella or salmonellosis if you do a lot of petting of the animals. If you have poultry in your backyard or in your front yard, if you have pets such as rodents, this could actually, or turtles, this organism can create problems for you as well. The next one is Staphylococcus aureus. Symptoms include actually nausea and vomiting, simply because this is an intoxication. Some people may have diarrhea. Basically, Staphylococcus aureus is linked to foods that are not prepared in a sanitary environment. For example, maybe the people preparing them, do not have clean hands, or they have some lesions on their hands. And also there is perhaps temperature abuse of the food. For example, using heat lamps to keep the food warm if there is a buffet of some sort. So some examples include, puddings and pastries and sandwiches and salads that are made by hand. And Vibrio, I think maybe this is one of the last ones we will cover. This is an infection that starts after 24 to 48 hours of exposure, causes watery diarrhea, nausea, stomach cramps, fever as well. And common food sources include shellfish that is undercooked, or sometimes people actually consume raw shellfish, such as oysters, very popular in the United States. People simply take oysters and add some lemon juice or sometimes some hot sauce and consume it that way. And it can lead to vibriosis caused by this particular microbe. And this is norovirus. I would say the number one cause of foodborne illness in the United States is norovirus. And symptoms start very quickly, 12 to 48 hours after exposure. It's usually diarrhea, stomach cramps, and stomach pain. And some of the common resources or sources of norovirus infection is really produce, such as salads, and also cut fruits if you're having a fruit salad, shellfish such as oysters, and water that has been contaminated. On top of that, you could get norovirus infection from other people as well. When people actually give each other high fives or shake hands, so on and so forth, you can transmit your virus to other people as well. Okay, and I think this is the last pathogen that I would like to cover. It is Cyclospora. It's a parasite, and usually you would have symptoms approximately 1 week after your exposure. You may have watery, profuse diarrhea. You may lose your appetite. You may, as a result, lose some weight. People experience stomach pains, bloating, gas, fatigue, so on and so forth. And again, this is a parasite, not necessarily a microorganism. It's quite large, and this is how you can visualize it using light microscope. And raw fruits and vegetables and some herbs actually have been linked to Cyclospora infections. I have some slides on foodborne illness diagnosis and treatment, but let's actually go through these quickly. I'm not going to discuss them very quickly. I just want to tell you how to avoid foodborne illness. And I have, I think, a couple of slides on that. Let's go to prevention. I think that is important for everybody. At the end of the day, we need to learn how to prevent foodborne illness. And, Dr. Adnan, if he would like to share these slides with you, that'll be fine with me. Okay, let's skip these as well. But I just want to tell you just a couple of things about how to prevent foodborne illness. I think I have like 3 more minutes to go. Maybe one more slide. Okay. Let's talk about how to prevent foodborne illness. And there are 4 things that I want everybody to remember. One of them is clean. The other one is separate, cook, and chill. Very quickly, let's talk about the first one. Obviously, we need to clean our hands and our surfaces really very well when we are preparing foods. The basic rule is washing your hands for 20 seconds with soap and hot water before, during, and after preparing food for yourself or your loved ones, and making sure you wash your utensils, your cutting boards, your countertops with hot water and soap, and make sure you rinse everything. When I say everything, I'm not talking about things like chicken or poultry. I'm talking about fresh fruits and vegetables under running water. Never ever wash your fish or your chicken or your turkey or your beef with water. When you cook them, you're going to kill all the microbes anyways. Regarding separation, make sure you separate your cutting boards for different kind of meats and poultry and seafood. When you do your grocery shopping, make sure you separate all those foods. Juices should never ever contaminate a food. And when you refrigerate your food, you have different sections in your refrigerator so that if something is contaminated, the other things do not get contaminated because of that. And the next one is cooking to the right temperature. We have different guidelines in the United States regarding how to cook meat. We have different temperatures. Of course, here we use degrees Fahrenheit. Very likely you use degrees Celsius in Pakistan. But, with, beef and lamb, with fish or ground beef or steaks, with poultry, we have different kind of temperatures. And when you check the temperature, it has to be the internal temperature so that you can be sure your food is fully cooked. And lastly, and I think this is my last slide here, we talked about cleaning and separating and cooking. Now chilling, there is something called danger zone. Here in the United States, we call it any temperature between 40, which is the refrigerator temperature, all the way up to 140. This is considered danger zone. And we don't want any food to be kept at this zone because a lot of foodborne pathogens can grow. Another very important rule is if you have perishable food, refrigerate it in 2 hours. If it is more than 2 hours, you may want to consider tossing it. And if your refrigerator is not at 40 degrees, let's say electricity is gone, or there is some sort of a natural disaster, all of those foods needs to be tossed. Last but not least, if you have food that you want to cook and they are frozen, do not ever melt it on your countertop. Do it in the refrigerator overnight or do it under water. So leaving frozen food on a countertop overnight is a disaster. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for being there and thank you for your attention. Once again, Dr. Adnan, please share my slides with anybody who's interested in having a copy. And once again, thank you for your invitation. I truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Professor Dr. Gulhan Unlu. You have excellently about the food safety, hazards, mycotoxins, bacterial pathogens, and foodborne illness diseases, and their impact or problem, either they are long-term or the short-term. And you also mentioned tremendously about the thumb rule of food infection, intoxication, and also you draw a picture of it was a concept that foodborne diseases are mainly caused in the underdeveloped country. But from your presentation, you mentioned 48 million people sick every year in the United States and suffer and got hospitalized. So it's not the case only for underdeveloped country. It's a shared approach, and it's a problem or attention of everyone. That's why we are here to celebrating the World Food Safety Day. Thank you so much. Thank you so much again. You have, despite of so many engagement and FFA events at Idaho, despite of that, you spared us time for us. On behalf of my university, my Vice Chancellor, my institute, I again thank you so much for your time, valuable time. Thank you so much.
It is my pleasure. Thank you for your invitation. Truly appreciate it. And I wish everybody a happy graduation. I know you have students graduating, and have a wonderful World Food Safety Day.
Thank you, Professor. We have another speaker. If you want to stay with us, it's up to you, because it's a lot, already a lot. I think 11 in the night at your side, as per the time zone space. So if you want to stay, otherwise we will love to see you stay in the presentation. But if you want to skip, it's up to you. We will start. We warmly welcome to our other speaker, that is Professor Ahmed Hassan El Ghorab from the Jauf University. He will speak about the food safety scenario. Assalamu alaikum, Professor. Can you hear me?
I hear you very well.
Warmly welcome for today's events and the celebration of World Food Safety Day. So it's up to you. It's over to you. You may start your presentation.
Inshallah. Thank you for your invitation, and I'm very nice to be with you in that day, because food safety in all the world is very important for everybody, not in underdeveloped country, but all the world. Food safety is very important.
Yes.
So I can start my presentation.
So either you want to move by yourself, or if you can ask me, I can play slides for you and you can talk accordingly.
You can
okay,
put
I am doing
presentation.
That. I'm doing that. You can just speak on
presentation.
that. Open
Okay.
the other one. Sorry for inconvenience, Professor. We were just about to managing the things. How's the weather in the KSA?
It's okay now?
Just wait for a while, please.
Yeah. I can start, Dr. Adnan?
Yes, you may start. Meanwhile, we are just like sharing the slides at your screen as well. You may start, please.
Okay. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على المبعوث رحمة للعالمين سيدنا محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم. أما بعد, inshallah, we speak today about food safety. I am Dr. Ahmed El Ghorab, Chemistry Department, College of Science, Jauf University. Food safety. Everyone who handles food must make sure it's safe to eat. You need to understand how food becomes contaminated and how to prevent it. The priority is to protect consumer from harm. Poor safety can lead to illness or even death. Get it wrong. Complaints, illness, food has to be thrown. Bad reputation, loss of customers, closed down, legal claims or fines. Get right. Safe food, less waste, happy customers, good reputation. Food hazard, anything that could be cause harm, physically, plasters, hair machinery, chemical, cleaning, product, pesticide, poisonous planet rate poison, microbiology, bacteria, virus, cloud, all of it, allergic, not surely all of it begins. In underdeveloped countries, most of the food stuff, be they manufactured or processed, are unsafe for consumption. Do you agree? Or what? We have eating safe? Probable answer, no or don't know. Why? We have our reasons. Let's try to understand. Food safety refer to all those hazards that may make food injurious to the health of the consumer. This issue is not negotiable. What consumer expect? Consumer expect protection from hazards all along the entire food chain, from primary producers through consumer, described as farm to plate, but specific concern about food hazard, adulteration, unhygienic food handling, microbiology hazard, mitigated food additives, environmental and chemical contamination, biological toxin, pesticide residues. Food adulteration within chemical has reached at a dangerous level, poisoning as serious of health hazard in the country. Proportion of adulterated food items under developed country market varied between about 70%. Food safety research, 30% of the stored or prepared food of items carries more than 20% higher DDT, dichloro, aldrich, all of this. 5 pegs of the food safety concern. We have 5 food safety concern. Foodborne illness, most relevant, most prevalent risk with food. 76 million Americans suffer from food poisoning each year. More than 300,000 people hospitalized, more than 5,000 die. Food contaminants, a wide variety of other substances mixed with food caused health issue. Heavy metal, lead, mercury, cadmium causes serious cases of poisoning or diseases. Pesticides exposure used many agriculture operation, from the fruit or vegetable production and animal feeding operation, linked to infertility, birth defect, nervous system damage, and even causes cancers. Antibiotic resistance, widespread over antibiotic can cause the development of antibiotic resistant diseases and infection. Environmental effect, agriculture is the major contributor to greenhouse gas emission and environmental pollution, soil degradation, water, air contamination, all of that, and climate change. Pesticide on our plate. National Food Safety Laboratory, Institute of the Public Health, detected excessive pesticide residue, aflatoxin, for formaldehyde, hazard, colored agents, and everything, soaking raw fish, pesticide. Many of these highly poisoning, they destroy nerve cells, result in heart attack, spontaneous abortion, stomach, injection, beef, cow, the unhygienic practice in food handling, preparation and serving, formation, formalin, pesticide, food, everything in this must be effect on the food safety. What we normally see here, toxin colors in foods, food adulteration, cadmium in the buffered rice, tea adulterated with exhausted tea leaves, food items adulterated, fruit, vegetable, milk, fish, sweet meat, rice, wheat, everything. Sweet meat are adulterated with toxin, sodium, cyclamate, color, formalin, everything. This is maybe adulterated of the food. Fruit are adulterated with calcium carbide, the formalin, injection with color. The common source of hazard. What is the source? What is the source of effect on the food health, food safety? Arsenic, nitrate, and nitrate hazard. More than 1,400,000 tube well red dangerous arsenic. Rice and many food crops, high arsenic. 1.4 million people exposed arsenic above governmental drinking water. WHO upper limit nitrate 222 milligram as 60 kg for adult. nitrate from fertilizer, accumulate vegetable and fruit, agriculture, livestock production, huge amount nitrate seep into groundwater, nitrate and nitrite from carcinogenic, heavy metal in our food, contamination of the heavy metal, a global more than developed country like Bangladesh, Pakistan, and Egypt, and everything, manganese and cadmium toxicity were detected in every water from fish sample highly contaminated by BP. This is tiny solid waste, protein, poultry feed, everything. This is me buying rice from market. Is it safe? If you want to buy rice, this arsenic is deadly poison. Heavy metal contaminant, cadmium, and high chromium coming from tiny industry, milk, vegetable, fish water of the river found high lead sample of the rice from industrial field. This is leads to 0.24 ppm. Unsafe food, toxin from planets, food contaminated with fungi, toxin, aflatoxin, improper storing causes wasting, rotting, contamination, diseases, and death, infestation, insect worms rate, washing, poor improper storing. This is effect on the food safety, buffer fish or wrong mushroom. This is liver and causes liver and the kidney failure and possibly disease. Fungus that grows in peanuts. This is causes liver cancers. Highly contaminated food, beef and poultry, polychlorinated bienfire, malicion, all of this, that is the main reasons and the main causes which make the food unsafe. Factors accelerating adulteration of the food in underdeveloped countries, inconcise and weakness in existing food law and regulation, low level awareness. This is the all people need awareness, inadequate availability of the food meet demands, absence of unified food safety policy and unified food safety law. Does it all depend on the more concern about price than quality and safety of the food? One of the part of the consumer, availability of the formalin and the other adulterants in the very low price is the availability in our food. Solution, what we had. The constitution of the people, underdeveloped country, ensure food nutrition and improve the public health. Constituent mandate are this very article, and many people speak about this, raising of the level of nutrition and improvement of the public health. Other important legislation are the consumer right protection. A large number of the law as a single purpose for the food safety may indicate the level concern. Two major aspects involved. Diabetes and this act as a legal solution, prevention and legal action. This is the solution, prevention. Everything food safety speak about the legal action and the prevention of legal action. More emphasize the legal action than on the prevention. What we have, the Food Safety Act 2013, within prevention, many years in pursuit of the food adulteration, need effective implementation and the monitoring of the law ensuring the safe food should be applied. The law need many active organization awareness must be all the people speak about the awareness, and the government must be concentrated about the awareness of the people to give him all the knowledge about the food safety, because you know the food safety didn't depend on the people only or the government or the farmer. The food safety depends on all of us, because this is important, this effect on our health. Consumer undertaken responsibility to help the law enforcement and court. how to remember our food safety effort should not only be reactive and enforcement, but we need holistic approach ensuring all food products safe. So modern food law not only contain necessary legal power, but precipitation of the ensure of the food safety, establish competent food authority or authorities to build preventive approach into the system. How to do? The important rule for food safety is deliver information, education, device, stakeholder across the farm to table contaminant, to provide balanced, factual information to all consumers for wise decision making, to provide training information, package, and educational program for the farmer, food handlers. That's everything, because you know all the people do have any behavior or any attack to or any work with the food effect on the food safety. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Hassan El Ghorab, for your kind presentation and your valuable talk about the food safety as per the theme. So I would like to request now Dr. Atif Liaquat from the Institute of Food Science and Technology about his views about for the today's talk. He is the person in our institute who is dealing with the food microbiology, pathogens, and the food safety. So please welcome Dr. Atif.
Thank you, Dr. Adnan. With respect to today's World Food Safety Day, first of all, we should know about the enemies of food. That is the hazards, which are hazards. We can ensure food safety while we are knowing the hazards or the enemies of food. So those are categorized into physical, chemical, and biological types. And you have listened our speakers talking about different type of hazards, physical, chemical, and particularly the biological, bacteria, viruses, and molds. Okay, the work starts from the farm, and we use farm to fork approach to ensure food safety. From farm, it starts with the handling and transportation, and then processing, finally packaging, storage, and up until it reaches the consumer's table. At every step, it needs to ensure the safe handling, safe processing, good manufacturing practices to avoid all type of hazards. So I think most of the people are well aware of different type of hazards, and you people have recently completed your internships, and you know different type of approaches, HACCP and ISO to ensure food safety and quality of the food. With this, Dr. Adnan, please.
Thank you. We are lucky to hear with us our Pro Vice Chancellor, Professor Dr. Shehzad Murtaza. I would like to request Professor Dr. Shehzad Murtaza to say some concluding remarks or the vote of thanks to our distinguished speakers, Professor Dr. Hassan El Ghorab from the Jauf University, Saudi Arabia, and Professor Dr. Gulhan Unlu from University of Idaho. With your huge round of applause, please welcome Professor Dr. Shehzad Murtaza, the Pro Vice Chancellor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulil kareem. Assalamu alaikum to all. It is indeed honor to be here, and I am very thankful for the organizing committee and also the foreign speakers, Dr. Gulhan Unlu. Thank you, Dr. Saab, for your kind, precious time and valuable discussions. Okay, and also Professor Dr. Ahmed from Saudi Arabia for your valuable comments on the day related to the World Food Safety Day. This is very important because our new generation will be strengthened only if we will get very valuable and very useful food, which is important for their health. As we know that it is difficult to develop a strong nation without a very important ingredients in the food, and as the life is changing very fastly, and we are now moving away from our traditional foods, and it is important to revive our tradition again. So the organizing this type of conferences and this type of workshop, it is also very, very important for the improvement. So I really appreciate the department and the director Farhan Chutai Saab for organizing this conference, this workshop, this seminar, and also his team. So once again, I'm very thankful to the chief, the guest, the foreign guests they shared their valuable expertise with the students and our faculty member. So thank you very much again. Allah bless you all.
Thank you, Professor Dr. Shahzad Murtaza, the Pro Vice Chancellor, for your kind words. For the conclusion, I must say there that Food Safety Day was started by the Food and Agriculture Organization in June 2018, and it's a consecutive 5 years we are here celebrating and commemorating the World Food Safety Day. And you people get the lot of information from our both speakers, from Gulhan Unlu and also Professor Dr. Hassan El Ghorab about the importance of this day. Again, on behalf of my institute, I say huge or great thanks to Professor Dr. Gulhan Unlu. She is always kind enough, and despite of time zone difference and despite of so many activities, even traveling, she is kind to spare us time for us. So thank you so much again. And last but not the least, our brother, our very dear Professor Hassan El Ghorab from the King Saud University, King Saudi Arabia. He is always also kind enough, and he always says let back to our call whenever we call him, either for the conference or any kind of this activity. So on behalf of my university, on behalf of my Vice Chancellor, and on behalf of my institute, I must say huge thanks to you. May Allah bless all of us. Stay blessed. Thank you very much. And a very happy World Food Safety Day to all of us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We have a very small walk outside the civil auditorium, so please join for 2 minutes. So thank you for the time being. See you guys again in future, and we are going to move towards the awareness walk as per the theme of the World Food Safety Day.